Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Limp, and I'm here with a special treat for you all. As you can see, I am panning across a massive, beautiful neoprene map right now of pretty much most of Europe, the top of Africa, all the way into Russia. Even the Nordic countries, Norway and Sweden, are here as well. This map covers everything, and this is for a new game that is coming out by the same people that brought you the game War Room. Now, this game is Imperial Borders, the Congress of Vienna. So this is right after the French Revolution. Napoleon has been taken out, and they are getting ready to try to make peace, to redraw the map and get things like they were before France kind of went crazy and did all the stuff that they did during their revolutionary period. Now, historically, the Congress of Vienna did succeed and peace was had, all right? So they were able to redraw lines and come to some agreements that worked. But now the option is going to be given to you, whether or not there's going to be peace and where exactly these lines are going to be drawn, because we have up to 6 players in this game. You've got England, you've got France, you've got Prussia, you've got Austria, you got Russia, and way down over here, you can't even see them, you got Spain as well. Since this map is so large and covers so much space, though, I simply can't show you all of it in the same shot. I would have to have a camera mounted to my ceiling to be able to get all of this game in its glory. These people definitely have the right mindset of go big or go home. War Room was a massive, beautiful game, and this one is standing in line to be no different. They are bringing the big, just glorious map to your table and putting it all in your hands to decide how history is going to fold out. So obviously, with this game being so big, I can only do the single view. I can't do the front on view. I can't fit it. But what we're going to do here is I'm just going to give you a basic highlight of how the game is going to be played. We're going to walk through a quick turn. Now, what I have set up here is what you might see at the start of a 4-player game. I have left Russia and Spain out of it and only set up the British, the French, the Prussians, and the Austrians. These are the 4 nations that you see with their colored units already set here on the map. Everything else that is in this like lightish green color here, this is kind of like neutral territory. So this is what you're going to be fighting over, but not just this, because you can annex each other's territory as well. Before we get started and how the turn's going to go, let me make sure I mention just a couple of quick heads up things. 1, this is a prototype. Everything that you see is prototype components. These are not indicative of the final components nor the final rules. There might be some minor changes here or there, especially with the components. These are going to be updated before it goes into the final. Obviously, these are like 3D printed and the like, just to fill for right now. The map, however, this is neoprene, and this is going to be indicative of the final components. I did talk to them about that, and all maps are going to be neoprene. They are not doing that thing where it's like, oh, you can pay an upgrade. No, everyone gets neoprene. You get neoprene, I get neoprene, everyone gets a neoprene map. So it's all set for everyone. No upgrades needed. It's just the standard base package. Hey, you get the game, you get the neoprene map. But regardless, make sure you do keep that in mind as we start going over into these components, that they are not the final. It shows you kind of what you can expect, but it's not the end-all, be-all. All right, so what you're seeing in front of you now, like I said, is a rough estimate of a start. It can be a little different, but generally speaking, you're going to have your main territories, which are going to be in your color. You will have 1 capital territory that will have your flag on it, and it will have a capital fort in it. So this is the most upgraded fort level that you can have. You will also have 4 other territories to give you a total of 5, right? So 1 capital and 4 major territories around, and these will also grant you things like income and taxes. You can tell by the capital symbol that is in each one of these spaces. You see here for province, there's 2. For Aquitaine, there's 2. But for Paris over here, there's 3. It grants you 3 money when you do have control of this region. Besides that, the factions can start with one minor area that they already control. France, for example, has Corsica down over here, and you see how it only has a single symbol on it, designating the fact that you only get one income, and it also has the minor level of a fort. Now, I will get into forts and ports when we start talking about combat, but just understand there are 3 different levels when it comes to your forts and your ports. 1 being the weakest, 3 being the strongest. All right, so I've got a nice little sequence of play. We're going to use this and we're going to walk down top to bottom just to give you the basics again on how the game's going to play. First thing is you're going to be collecting your taxes. Each nation will have a little tray that they can put their money in. Like I said, different regions provide different income. Your main regions will provide you 11 total income, 2 for each one of the major regions and then 3 for the capital region. With France having that and 1 other region that provides a single income, that gives them a total of 12. You'll take your 12 money, put it in your treasury, and that's how you keep track of it. Later on during battles, when you take out opponents' pieces, you'll also put them here, and you can use that for scoring at the end of the game turn. There are a few other ways to gain money. It does indicate here that Great Britain gets 2 gold each turn from the colonies, but that does require that they are not blocked off, so they're not blocked at sea from that income. We can see here on the British map right next to their territory is the British colonies. It shows a couple of income, and it just is here as a reminder to get that income if you do have control of the seas. Also at the start of the game, Britain and Prussia get an extra little gold chest. These are worth 5, whereas the coins are only worth 1, and they both start with the extra 5 due to the fact that they took out Napoleon. All right, so that's our first thing. Second thing is we plot our secret orders. Now this is really where the game starts to kick into drive. I'll expand on this later, but one of the strong points I think for this game is the secretive nature and the diplomacy. It's wheeling and dealing because anything can happen in this game. You can make deals with your opponents, your allies. You can backstab them. You can be treasonous. You don't have to uphold your end if you don't want to. Really, anything can happen in this game. It's all about how you're interacting with your opponents and how they're interacting with you. They might make that promise, oh yeah, let's attack Britain. I swear I'm not going to come get you. And then you move your troops and suddenly they pour into your weak flank. Or maybe you pay them, hey, I'll give you 10 gold if you don't attack me. You can make any of those types of deals. Now this all starts with your player board. Each faction is going to have one of these, and it is dry erase. Let me fold this out so you guys can see. Here at the top, it's got a whole bunch of information that you can use during the game. Reminders for battle, what units are worth, how strong the forts are, all that type stuff is listed down here on the top. And you see again, also our sequence of play is listed down here for every player. The real cool part though, is here's the map of all the territory in the game. So we are the French right now. We've got this territory. During this segment of the game, plotting secret orders, this is where we are going to use our dry erase markers and mark on this board where our units are moving. We don't have to move them, but obviously you do want to move your troops because you want to try to gain control of the territory. So, looking for an example here, let's look at Lorraine. In Lorraine, I have the triad. This is something you want to try to form as much as possible. I'll touch on it again in combat, but I've got a full unit of infantry, some cavalry, and a cannon here ready to go. If I wanted to move them into, what is this, Württemberg? Yeah, Württemberg right next to them to gain control of that, I would look here on my map. Here's Lorraine. Here's Württemberg. I would simply draw a line and put 3 dots to indicate I've got 3 units moving into that space. Now, there might be more units than that, but you're just marking how many units are moving. You don't have to say specifically, I'm moving a cannon and a cavalry into that. You just mark how many are going into that location, and your opponents will check your map to make sure you do it correctly. If you do write down orders that are inaccurate or unable to be done, then those orders do get canceled and the units are not allowed to move. So that's something you have to make sure you write it down correctly, because your opponents will be checking back over you. But I love this aspect of the game because this is really where everything's going to start to play out. You're promising your opponents, hey, I'm going to do this. But like I said, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. You just do whatever you're going to do. Now, of course, if you start betraying your allies too early, no one's going to trust you and they're all going to turn on you. So it's waiting for that crucial moment to backstab them when they don't know it's coming. So once you are done here, you will mark down for all your units where you're moving them, where they're going. You'll take your card. Every nation has a card, and you'll place it face up by the turn track to indicate that you are done issuing your orders. After everyone gets done and places their cards down, then you will eyeball this later to ensure that the orders are correct. We will do that in the on the march phase of the game. But first, we have to establish our turn order. So let's say this is our situation now. All 4 nations that are playing in the game are here and ready to go. And we are at our established turn order. So everyone's plotted their secret orders. Now we have to bid for your turns. That's where you will take money from your treasury and you will bid. If you want to go first, if you really need to get your troops moving and attacking before your opponent, you need to bid high. But remember, whatever you bid, you lose. This money is going to be spent and you only get so much. And that money has to be used to repair your forts, repair your ships, and buy new units. So you can't dump everything into the turn order. You have to gauge how much your opponents are willing to wager versus what you have. So every faction will secretly bid, and once everyone's claimed their bids, then you'll reveal what you bid. That gets put back into the common coffers, and the highest bidders start claiming their turn order. That's where they're going to place their card over here on this turn record track. Now, you don't have to go first. If you want to go later, you want to go after your opponents, you can. It's completely up to you. Whoever has the highest bid will pick where they want to go. And then so on down the line, the bidders will place their cards. The bidders will place their cards in a descending order. If you do have neutral nations, like we have 2 neutral nations, Russia and Spain, they will always occupy the last 2 slots. So in this case, it'll be 5 and 6. Now, you do not have to bid anything. You can bid 0, but if you bid 0, you will be randomly placed after everyone who did bid something gets their turn on the turn record track. So if you want, maybe just bid the 1. That way, if someone's out there trying to conserve their money for other things, at least you get to choose before them. All right, and now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. We are in the on the march phase. This is where you're going to review your orders, resolve movement battles, and then check the status of tokens. So review orders. That is what I was talking about earlier, where everyone will eyeball their opponent's player cards to make sure that the orders that they wrote down are valid. There are certain spaces on the board that will restrict movement. We have 2 different types of mountains, for example, brown-topped mountains and white-topped mountains. Brown-topped mountains can be crossed normally, so there's no problem in ordering troops across these mountain zones. However, if we wanted these 2 half infantry to cross these white mountains, they would first have to be ordered to move into the mountains, and then in the following movement phase, they could be ordered to move out of the mountains. So you have to spend a turn in here in the mountains. Also, just so you know, you cannot move along a mountain range. You can only move into it and then out of it. So you can't go here and then like transfer up over here to come out over in a different zone. You do have to cross directly into a territory. So, for example, if the French player had given an order saying he was moving these 2 units into the Piedmont, that order would be canceled because it's not a valid order. He has to move directly into the mountains first and stop there. In a case of a canceled movement order, you place a white marker to the units to indicate the fact that they did have orders, but they got canceled. However, looking over here, let's say the movement order that we talked about previously for France, The full infantry, the cavalry, and the cannon want to move into Württemberg here. This is a valid move order, so they could execute their movement. And in that case, you would put a blue arrow on them. And that indicates that these units have moved this turn, but they have not been involved in a battle. That is very key. You do have to keep track on whether or not units have been involved in a battle. And that is because during a game turn, a unit can be involved in any number of defensive battles. In other words, they can be attacked any number of times. However, they can only be aggressive, choose to attack, or support an ally in attack. Because remember, you can gang up against people only once. And in that case, once they have been involved in a battle, you will replace the blue arrow with a red one, which symbolizes the fact that they have been involved in a battle. Now, there's a lot more to movement besides just what I have labeled out so far. The cavalry, for example, do have a bonus that is not available to other types of unit. And that is they will get their orders like normal, carry them out, and then they can move one distance further. When it comes to movement, normal units, everything but cavalry, can move up to 2 territories. So if we wanted, we wouldn't have to stop here in Württemberg. We could go to Bavaria or the Thuringian states over here. Those units could continue to go. Let's say they did decide to continue on into this zone. In that case, the cavalry, if they wanted, could continue further one extra zone. And this does not have to be put down in your book. So when you're marking out your orders, you only have to mark down where the units are going to end. And then the cavalry can decide to move that one extra distance without it being marked down. So when it comes to ships and movement, ships have the ability to move up to 6 sea zones. So you see how this is delineated on the board by these little anchor lines that separate the different zones. Both types of ships, so we have frigates and ships of the line, can move up to 6 zones. Of course, for nations like Britain, though, you're going to see that they're going to need to use ships to transport their units. They have to cross the sea to attack their opponents and gain new territory. Both types of ships can carry up to 2 full infantry. So we see our full infantry here. So a single ship could carry 2 of these, or they could carry up to 4 of these, the half infantry. And then, of course, things like cannons and cavalry both count as 1, but they can carry up to 2 along with them as cargo. They would have to go to a port that's on the board, which are designated by these circle symbols along the coast of all the different territories, to offload their cargo. Ships even have the ability to stop off and pick up extra units along their way, but once they go to a port and decide to offload, they will have to end their movement in that zone. For a ship to be able to offload in a port, though, they either going to have to control it, so like Britain controls its ports along its coast, or it has to be neutral where they will gain control of it, or they would have to attack the port itself, which we'll cover when we start getting into battle. So the last thing, when it talks about checking the status of tokens, you will add or remove any that are applicable, like the arrows that I was talking about earlier, or you will place down little hotspot tokens like this that represent the fact that there's going to be a conflict there, or there can be a conflict there. It doesn't always have to be. Now, to make this simple, let's say that we have a situation like this where Austria has a couple of half units and a minor fort here. And when France did their movement, they went all the way into this zone. So now they've invaded over there. You'll take and mark that with a hotspot token. And then in this phase, there's not a separate phase. This is all the on the march phase. You will start resolving all of these hotspot markers. Now, I do need to make sure I set this correctly because this is the correct way up and down. And you do that because once you have resolved the conflict here, pieces can remain. So if that conflict has been resolved, you'll turn it to its side to indicate the fact that you've already done the combat in that zone. But speaking of combat, I know that's what you guys are interested in. Let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty of it. Let's say this is our example here. That France has invaded this zone and they want to get a fight going. When it comes to battle, there is all of this involved with the battle. There's a lot going on with battle. There's a pre-battle, there's a during the battle, and then there's a post-battle. So there's a lot going on when it comes to combat. Very briefly, when it comes to the pre-battle, that's where there's going to be negotiations. So Austria, for example, could offer France monies to not attack them. That's what I was talking about earlier with diplomacy playing such a huge part of this game. It effectively makes it to where the rules aren't a hard and fast, you have to do this, units move there. Like, no, you can wheel and deal. You can make choices together to affect the outcomes of things. But when diplomacy fails, that's when combat ensues. After that, you have to choose sides and assign commanders. Now, what do I mean by assign commanders? It's fairly obvious here in this situation where there's just two sides. Each player is going to be the commander of their forces, but it would change up if there are other forces in the map at the same time. You could have a situation where you've got forces from all the players in the same zone at the same time. They can ally, they can turn, they can do whatever. They can fight whoever they want to. So the British could abstain from this conflict, or they could jump in on the side of Austria. Same goes for the Prussians. But there can only be one.
There can be only one
commander for each side. So in other words, only one player is making the final say when it comes to the choices made during combat. If you have a situation like that where there's multiple players involved, each side does have to pick that representative for their side. We'll keep things simple though, and we'll say that this is our conflict. Now, last thing you're going to do pre-battle step is you're going to transfer them to the battle board, because there is a specific board where you will wage out battles. Now, with this game being as big as it is, of course, there's not one battle board, there's two. And I love the fact that they included this, because some battles could be fought on a smaller board. They included a tiny little round disc you could set your forces on. So if there's only a skirmish going on, just a few pieces for each side, you'd use something like this to use as your battle board. And it's reversible because it has the port on the other side. Because yes, you can fight over ports. It's got the little sea area here where you put your ships, any ground forces, and of course, the little marker right here at the front where the port can get involved, because yes, the port does get involved in the fight. But however, sometimes you'll have a big fight going on, and that's when you'll resort to this board, which has 4 different sections for the combat to take place on. And of course, on the flip side, we've got the port. So if it's a sea battle going on, if it's just open sea and nothing but ships, then you'll take place any place you want. You just need an open place to have the battle. However, if it is at a port specifically, you will use this side of the player board. All right, so what do I mean by the open sea? I wanted to make sure and elaborate that just a little bit. If we had this going on, this conflict, you could just fight it out right here. You wouldn't have to transfer anyone to the board. When it comes to ship battles, you simply place them in a line in the order you want them to take damage. So the front ship will be hit before the rear ship, and then on down the line, depending on how many ships you have. If you have it taking place like this, right? That's a port battle. That's where you use the port side of the battle board. One of these, you don't have to move them. You can just line them up accordingly. Here, then you're going to actually use the player board with the port. All right, so I set up the player board real quick for our example battle just to be able to show it to you guys. Again, something I really like is they have the diagram surrounding the board here, indicating what type of dice and how many each ones of your different troops get. Now, something you'll notice is the little fort is here because that counts towards the battle and it rolls dice. Now, we're not going to play through all this battle, but I am going to tally up the dice just so you guys can see how that works. Now, something that you have is a couple of these tokens to indicate whether you're going to be offensive or defensive. All right, let's say our French guys want to be offensive. They'll use the red side of this with the arrow to indicate that they are going aggressive. Let's say our Austrians here, they're just trying to hold on. So they put their token down defensively. Well, what does that mean? On our custom dice here, there is the bar symbol. A bar symbol will either be extra hits or it will cancel hits depending on which one of these that you chose. So if you are confident and you want to wipe out your opponents, then you're going to go aggressive and try to get those extra hits through. If you're just trying to hang on by your teeth, then you want to get every hit canceled that you possibly can. Around the board here, this gives us an indication of how many and what types of dice that we get for our different units. Up here along the top, it indicates the fortresses. Remember, I said that fortresses are levels 1, 2, and 3. We have a minor, a major, and a capital. This is a minor fortress, so it only gives a single black dice to our pool. These are half infantry. Half infantry only contribute a single white die. And we place those down like so. So we've got our pool. This would be the entire amount of dice that the Austrians would roll. And when it comes to the white dice, they have blue and red hit markers on them. That's important because, as you see, these zones are color coded. Blue is in the front, red is in the rear. So depending on where you hit is where you're going to be able to apply that damage. So if they got red hits, they could choose between the units back here. If they got blue hits, they would be attacking the front full infantry unit only. However, something to keep in mind, when a fort is on the board and still able to take damage, then it has to be targeted first. It effectively protects its other units on the board. However, forts will reduce the amount of dice they throw based on how much damage they've received. A fort, again, level 1, 2, or 3 can roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, but you remove 1 for every damage that it takes. This being a minor fort, 1 damage to it will be enough to knock it out of commission. Don't forget, like I said, there is a chance to repair forts later in the turn. So that would be our Austrian dice. All right, well, what do we have here for the French? Our full infantry give us 3 white dice, right? So you see how having a full infantry is much better than having half infantry. They only grant 1 dice. So keeping these guys full strength is a good notion to do. You really want to keep them going. So we've got 3 dice for them. For our cavalry, they give us another white die. And for our cannon, they give us a black die. Cannon are important. Ships, forts, and cannons themselves all use the black die, and the black die is the only one that has the double hit on it. It does have the bar symbol, just like the white die, a hit symbol, then some misses, and it's got the crit effectively. It can do 2 hits. So you want to have as many cannons as possible. This would be our dice for the French, but the French have a bonus because they got the triad going. What's a triad, you ask? I'm glad you asked that question, Gippy. Here it is. Full infantry, cavalry, plus cannon. For each one of these that you have, this 3 bundle here, that gives you a triad. It indicates it down here. And that grants you a bonus of 1 black die and 2 white die, simply for having those 3 units. It's combined arms, right? You have everything. You've got the infantry, you got the cavalry, you got the cannons. You're hitting the trifecta, so you get a huge bonus in this game. So you want to have a triad as often as possible because that is a tremendous amount of bonus firepower to you. There are things like elite units, signified here by this little blue pennant, and they can grant their own bonus dice to you in combat as well. There are also medals, that is indicated down over here, that can also grant extra dice. I'm going to talk about medals when we get into scoring here in just a minute. So by looking at the amount of dice each side gets to throw, you can see why the Austrians would definitely want to go defensive and try to weather the storm as much as possible. You will conduct combat, rolling your dice and applying the hits, and the commanders get to make the choices. Remember, if there are other allies involved in the battle, only that commander gets to choose where certain hits are applied. You will either do this until one side is wiped out completely, or 3 rounds have elapsed. That's what I was talking about, where there can still be units on the board that are technically opposing each other. You don't fight until everyone's wiped out. If everyone is wiped out, that is a victory for whatever side accomplished it. But once 3 rounds have gone by, the combat is over. Now, just to show you very quickly how a port battle could be set up, it would look something along these lines, and that's all going to depend on where it's taking place, who's involved. Your ships will be out here in the sea zone. Whatever port you're at will be located here, and they operate very similar to how forts operate. 3 levels, they contribute 1 dice per level, and they remove dice again based on how much damage they have received. And remember, you line up your ships, and whatever front unit there is will take the damage first. Something interesting with ships that does not apply to any other unit in the game is they can be captured. So depending on how much damage a ship takes, for a ship of the line, it would be a couple damage. For a frigate, the smaller version, it would just be a single damage. They are called out of commission. If you have a situation where your ship is left out of commission, the opponent can potentially seize that ship as long as they do have forces available to take that ship, and you have no forces left to defend the out of commission vessel. They would have to repair it once they captured it, just like their own. I did mention this previously, but just to reiterate it, remember your little money bank here where you keep your coins. Whatever casualties you inflict on enemy forces will be placed in there, and that's going to be used to help tally your points at the end of the turn. Once then the turn ends, you will give back these units to the opponent so they can potentially buy them again, but you do keep casualties, your opponent's casualties, not your own. Any that you lose will be kept by your opponents, but you'll keep them in your little money bank here and tally those points at the end of the turn. Now, that's not even everything when it comes to battle. There is a lot more going on. Like I said, allies can get involved. Your units can earn elite status depending on how well you did in the combat. You can gain extra territory. There's a lot more going on with combat, but that gives you a basic heads up level view of what's going on with combat. Now, after combat, that's when you're going to attempt annexations. Because, like I said, you want to gain control of this territory. Not only this neutral stuff, but you can gain control of your opponent's territory as well. But just being there doesn't get it. So, seeing our units here, let's say our triad did stop here in Württemberg. We don't just get that. We don't just take control of it. There is a process to attempt to annex it into your territory where you will gain control of it. During your turn, you will place out these tokens, these attempt annexation tokens, in areas that you're going to try to gain control of. And when it comes that point of the turn, you will roll a white die for every land unit that you have in that territory. There are certain bonuses like medals and elite status that can gain you extra white dice, but generally speaking, you're going to roll 1 for every unit. All you're looking for is a hit. Once you get a hit, just a single hit on any of the number of dice that you roll, you do annex the territory, at which point you will get to place a fort on it with your little flag, signifying that that is now your territory, and it's going to now provide you that taxable income during the collect taxes portion of your turn. Next up, that's where we get into the scoring. And scoring, this could potentially end the game starting on the 5th turn, because that's when the Congress of Vienna is going to start taking place. But the game will end anywhere between that 6th and 9th turn, depending on whether people call for peace or not. This is where you are going to start tallying up. Sorry for the glare, because this is drive writable, so of course it's going to glare a little bit. My apologies, I'm doing the best I can. But anyway, this is where you're going to start tallying up what's called your medals. All right, so your medals chart. Highest national morale, annexed territories, most homeland territories, elite units, most elite ships, and then total all those points. So you'll write your numbers in here just depending on what they are, and I'm just throwing just random numbers in here, and then tally up whatever that total is over here at the right. So your board might look something like that, right? 7, 11, 5, 3, 1, totals 27. Well, that comes into play when you start looking at your prestige board. And again, there's one of these lines for every one of the different factions. And depending on what medals and how many you got, the highest points here, the top 3 are going to start adding prestige points. And this is really what you're looking for. This is your victory points for the game. So when the game ends, that's when whoever's the highest here is going to win the game. But like I said, there are medals, like actual medals in the game that you can pin on that go along with these different awards, and they can gain you things like you see here, gain extra gold, stuff like this. It gains you an extra bonus for your elite units, for your land and your ships. So you want to try to succeed as many of these as possible. Definitely the money, because you need that for everything. When it comes to the Congress of Vienna, again, that starts on turn 5. If it is voted in, there'll be a turn 6, and then you'll end it on that one. And effectively, every player will vote during the Congress of Vienna, and you're going to vote for war or you're going to vote for peace, right? So you'll take your little thing, peace or war. We always pick war. Always war. Anyway, whatever wins, whatever has the highest number is going to determine whether or not the game's going to end. So if most players are voting for peace, then you'll play the following turn and that'll end the game. And again, that's going to start on turn 5. So 6 could be the end turn, 7 could, 8 could, all the way up to 9. Once you hit 9, it passes no matter what, and the game will end on that round. It does start giving a little bonus. So on turn 5, it doesn't change it at all. It's whatever the players vote. So there needs to be a majority, not a tie. If there's a tie, war continues. But from that turn on, it will start adding 1 extra vote for peace because the people want peace. So turn 5, there's 0 extra votes for peace. Turn 6, there'll be 1. Turn 7, there'll be 2, and so on. That's not it, though. Once you do your whole vote for peace or the morale points and the prestige points, and that's all done with, there is one more phase of the game left, and that's where you're going to start repairing your forts, repairing your ships, and buying new units. So you see here the cost of new units. Half infantry 4, cavalry 6, full infantry 8, and so on, all the way down to a ship of the line that's 16 gold. Keep in mind, when you're starting off, you're only getting 12 gold. And of course, that's going to increase as you take more territory, but it can take 1 whole turn's worth of funds and taxes just to get a single ship. So you want to hold on to these. Definitely don't let your opponents capture them. But your forts can take damage. Again, like I said, up to their damage level, depending on how strong the forts are. And you can repair that for a cost of 3 gold for each point of damage. Not total, but each point of damage. When it comes to ships, remember ships of the line have 3, frigates have 2 points of total damage, but if they've got damage on them, they're out of commission, but they're not destroyed. You can repair these ships, but they have to be in a major or capital port. There are only a few capital ports in the game. The British have a couple of them, and Russia has 1. You can, however, repair in a friendly major port. So let's just say that the British were allied with the French. The French could allow the British to repair their ships in their major ports. They don't have to, but they could allow that. But you can't repair them in the minor ports that are attached to the minor nations over here. Any units that you do purchase will go either in your own major ports if they're ships or your territories themselves. It has to be your controlled territory. So you can't annex territory out here and then have new units appear there. Your new units would appear here and have to march out into the battlefield. Well, I tried to make this quick and it still took me a while because there's just so much going on with this game. And I haven't even covered half of it. I've given you the basics, right? We've hit the highlights of how a game turn's going to flow. But like I said, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Combat can get really unwieldy. And again, diplomacy, I think, is what's really going to be the drawing factor of this game, that wheeling and dealing between players. To me, this game is like the combination, that fun that people have with games like One Night Werewolf or Secret Hitler, right? Those secretive games where you're wheeling, dealing with the other players, and a war game. So it's combined the fun of a war game with the fun of those Among Us type games, right? Where you're, talking to each other and trying to figure things out, and kind of mashed it together into what we have here. And I gotta say, for it not being complete and these being prototype components, it is gorgeous, gorgeous on the table. They've really done an outstanding job with the map. It just looks so good. The only drawback that I'm going to give it right now is the fact that the game is huge. It is massive. I can't, like I said, I can't get the whole thing in frame because of just how big it is. Like I said, though, that's not necessarily a bad thing because I'm of the mindset of go big, go home. Some of the first war games I ever owned were just massive footprints. I love seeing a huge game like this spread across the table. It's really eye catching, especially if you set this up in a room. People are going to come up and they're going to watch. They're going to be intrigued about what's going on. Now, since it is me, I'm going to address the solitaire aspect of this. Can you play it solitaire? Yes. Would I play it solitaire? Yes. Are you losing something from the game by playing it solitaire? Yes. This game is just not going to be as good solitaire. It's just not. And it's nothing against the game. It's not bad on the game to be not as good solitaire, because not every game needs to be designed for that. This game is designed to have at least four players going at it. Six players rather, excuse me, having every nation filled would be just the perfect way to play this game. My thoughts on it: if I were going to try to solitaire this, I'd probably set it up like I've done it here, where I've got just four factions going, leaving the two extremes as neutral territory and just ignoring those, focusing here, and probably have them kind of like pair off. Maybe England and Prussia, or England and Austria versus, vice versa. That way it would streamline part of it, make it a little bit easier to play solitaire. I still think you could have fun playing this game solitaire, but the biggest draw, the fun of it, is that diplomatic angle, right? Even making deals about the Congress of Vienna. Maybe your buddy wants to try to end the game because he's leading right now. He's like, hey, I'll help you on the next turn. I'll give you extra gold, whatever. And you're trying to make the decision that you take it from him and you vote for more war, and then everybody turns on him. And suddenly he's no, like, that's the thing. That's that aspect that I think really is going to make this game shine. But you're not going to have that solitaire. And that's fine. Like I said, not every game has to be solitaire. They don't have to be that way. But this one is just beautiful. Anyway, like I said, they are going to be going to Kickstarter here very soon. Do keep in mind, everything you saw is prototype. It's not finalized components, but this is a good indication of what the finalized stuff's going to be. I think the neoprene mat should be finalized because this is already just beautiful. The map is my favorite part of it thus far. And setup isn't that bad. It's really not. You're not putting out that many units. The map's already laid out. There's not tiny little hexes that you have to find for counters, so it doesn't take a huge amount of time to set it up. And each player has their own player box. What I mean is you're going to have a box similar to that, and I ignore the plastic bags. That's just for neatness right now. But each one of these little sections will have the different units in it. You can have your little flags in it. There's a little divider. Now, it'll be better than this. Again, prototype. But to give you an example, you'll have something like this for every player. That way, the units are easy to get out, put on the board, keep separated. You can make change in your box really easily. So stuff like that. They've done what they can to streamline the process as much as possible. You are dealing with a lot of components, but the components you are dealing with or are organized as much as they can be to make setup as easy as possible. Yes, it's big. Yes, there's a lot going on, But if you do have multiple people doing it, you could set this game up in 10, 15 minutes, right? Setting it up by myself, I did it in 30, I think. And that was learning how setup went as I was doing it. So it really doesn't take a long time to get this one up and running. All right. Anyway, I'll stop yapping about it. I know this went on longer than I originally anticipated. I do think it's worth a look if you were into this time period and you're into these big grand games. If you got War Room, you probably want Imperial Borders. I'll just say that. If you like War Room, you're going to like this one. It's just easy. It's said and done. That's what it is. If you play your war games on a little TV tray, it's probably one you want to avoid. All right, but anyway, that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this one, rather. Make sure you go check out their Kickstarter and see the game for yourself. It's definitely worth checking out. All right, that's going to be it for me. Y'all take care. I'll catch you in the next one.